Hi, guys, and welcome to another edition of The Kevin Moore Show, which is sponsored by channeling.com. Now, on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Tricia McCannon. Now, Tricia is a renowned American clairvoyant, history author, and teacher who has traveled the world in search of answers to the greatest mysteries of the ages. Now, as a dedicated researcher and mystical symbologist in many ancient paths of wisdom, she is known as the mysterious expert. Now, her 4 books include The Angelic Origins of the Soul, Discovering Your Divine Purpose, Return of the Divine Sophia, Jesus, the Explosive Story of the Lost 30 Years, and Dialogues with the Angels. Now, not only does she join me today, but she's going to talk about 4 of the courses that she's doing with Sacred Publishing. Now, to get access to some of these courses, you can just go to the description below and you'll see a link to the 4 courses, which include Mary Magdalene and the Return of the Divine Godness, the Return of the Solar Lords and the Galactic Awakening, and the Lost Years of Jesus and the Secret Schools of Initiation, and the Mysteries of Ancient Egypt. Now, these courses are available on a discount right now. So if you use the coupon code MORE, MOORE 44 in the coupon code box, you'll get a discount of $44 right now. And the links to those courses are just below. So let me get Tricia on to discuss those courses and, of course, her work and much, much more. So without further ado, Tricia McCannon, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you. I've been loving our chats before we even started this interview, so perfect way to start.
Absolutely, we've had some fantastic chats off air, sort of getting to know your work. You know, I do have a previous video of you. I didn't think I did, but I do, and I'll link it below. It's one of a talk that you gave at, I believe it was one of Dolores Cannon's events, and yeah, it was always a popular talk. So I've never had you on, but I've had you on with a previous video.
Well, I love Dolores, and she was a wonderful pioneer in consciousness. And, her wonderful daughters, Julia Cannon, Julia's continued her work, and she's actually coming to Atlanta to do a course like on the past life progression work, which I've been doing for many, many years. And I'm very excited about that. And Nancy, the other daughter, has continued the publishing company for Ozark Mountain Publishing. So, I love doing their conferences. They're great people. So thanks.
Yeah, it was a very they've been very popular themselves. You know, the Dolores Cannon material, and of course, the conferences have been popular as well. But your work is obviously people like you is what drive the conferences, and your work is really interesting. I mean, you cover so many facets, and I mean, I almost want to go back to the point of origin here. Like, I mean, who was Trisha before being this sort of encyclopedia of knowledge, in a sense? let's just figure that out.
That's so funny that you say that because, my name is Tricia McCannon and my friends tease me and call me Encyclopedia Mechanica instead of Britannica. So that's so funny that you just like zeroed in on that at the beginning. Well, I do have a lot of knowledge, and I'm sure it comes from probably the school of hard knocks that we've all gone through our many, many lifetimes. But, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up here. My dad was a lawyer. He was a county attorney. He was definitely from the old Rugged Cross Baptist school. My mom was Methodist, and we became Episcopalian when I was about 10 years old, which I loved Episcopalian. I think of it as Catholic light. It's got all the beautiful, the incense and the genuflexing and all the beautiful ritual of the Catholic, but with no guilt. There wasn't any guilt, blame, or shame, which was wonderful. And so I grew up in a very traditional family outside of Atlanta, but the biggest thing for me was I grew up across from a great forest, and this was a huge blessing because I believe nature is one of the most powerful teachers we can ever have. And so I spent a lot of time after school in the forest. There was a beautiful spring, really clear spring. There were these standing stones that were made of granite, which of course we know granite has crystal in them. So it was a high vibration place. And I began to see the elementals, the divas in the forest. And, the elementals are like the guardian angels of the plant kingdom. And I don't think most people can see them. We're not trained in this society to see them, although some of the cultures in the East are trained to. And so I think that they told the overlighting angel of that forest to come and talk to me. And when I was about 8 years old, this angel came. He appeared to be male. He appeared to be about 6 feet tall. He had long, flowy hair. He was incredibly benevolent and kind, and he explained to me telepathically about the great chain of being and how the light and sound of the divine are stepped down through all the dimensions to eventually form the physical world. And that made perfect sense to me. I I could tell that there was a difference in him and me. He was far more connected to the unity consciousness of the universe. Uh, and he wasn't coming from the same he didn't have all the emotional baggage, even though he was compassionate. And so, in that sense, he was very loving. He didn't have the level of emotional confliction that humans have. So, I believe, that these angelic beings, as my work has progressed, and I've read for success in people around the world, and been able to have interaction with angels and masters and so forth, as I have over the last 40 years. Um, I believe that in the angelic form have a soul body and we have a spiritual etheric body, but the mental we don't have the same mental body. The mental body that humans have, we weigh, we judge, we analyze, we criticize, we separate, we try to discern. When you're operating from the soul body, it's able to move in 360 degrees and all dimensional levels. It's able to transmit enormous amounts of information in a blink of an eye, okay, to receive it and to transmit it. So this is how this angel operated. And so that was very, very powerful for me. And all the time I was growing up, as I shared with you earlier, when we talked yesterday, I kind of grew up in one of those great American dysfunctional families, and I struggled to understand why there was so much suffering in the world because I was experiencing it in my family. And of course, a lot of the suffering that we have is self-created, dysfunctional patterns we inherit from our families, addiction patterns. Abuse patterns, all these things that get passed down and people get caught in them like, an insect in a spider's web, and they can't seem to get out of the pattern. And so the way I coped with it was to take these long walks at night under the stars and rant and rave to the heavens about, you know, why this was the condition of the human race. And I began to experience this divine presence that walked at my side, who always would ask me questions that would bring me back to forgiveness and compassion and love. And, by the time my walk was over, I would be like, back in that place of balanced centeredness because of this, guardian, the spiritual guardian.
And sort of how long did that last for, in a sense, as well? That
Uh,
connection.
Many, many, many years. But the thing about that particular being is he would never show me his head. In fact, I'd yell at him, just materialize, okay? Which of course he didn't, And later I was to encounter him in my early 30s again. And when I encountered him, he had an eagle's head and a human body. And I realized that the reason he wouldn't show me his head before was because as a child, I probably just wasn't ready for it. The questions I would have been asking would have not been about helping me. It would have been about trying to understand who he was. And so, um, as you can imagine, I did a lot of praying growing up that someone wiser than myself would show up that could explain to me why one night I would be, in the temples of golden wisdom with masters. The next night I was in the bowels of the lower astral plane with dark entities. And it was like, okay, I'm obviously clairvoyant, clairaudient, but where's the roadmap and how do I steer this ship? And, where's the gas pedal? break.
Right, right, yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. How do you drive this and kind of allow yourself to, mediate that journey? But sometimes the journey has its own way of taking you. You're not in control in a sense of the steering wheel sometimes. So okay, so just okay. So between
What
20 and
happened then?
30, yeah, yeah.
Right.
So hang on. So okay, we never spoke to mum and dad about these visions that you were having.
No, I wrote poetry, spending time in the forest. I was downloading, what we would call channeling. Yeah, I was channeling poetry. And I bring home these gorgeous poems, and my sweet mother, on one hand, she's very much a product of her generation, the 50s and 60s. So you always had to dress beautifully, and the house had to be beautiful, and the dinner had to be on the table at the right time. And she was very proud of all of her children. But, the kind of pride that she normally had was things like, the scholastic achievements and things like that. And so, she was very proud of my poetry, but she could tell it was like very mystical and esoteric. And so, when the relatives would come over, she would like parade out the poetry, which embarrassed me terribly because that was my inner world. It was like I wasn't interested in having the relatives that were into, business and money making and things like that, read my innermost stuff. And so I learned very early on to kind of keep it to myself because, like, there was this garden that I used to go to, and I talk about it in my first book, which is Dialogues with the Angels. And it was this beautiful garden where you pass between a portal between two trees. And I now know that in the great mystery schools, they were two pillars where you pass from the mundane world into the inner realms. And of course, as a child, my soul memory I had of that, but I had no historical context for that. And I would go to this garden, and there were the most beautiful divas there. The woman who was a little old lady who raised flowers, beautiful flowers. And I was just in heaven there because it was like, think about hummingbirds and fairies flying around. They were everywhere. Oh my gosh. And so, of course, my mother wound up wanting to know where I was going after school. And, I tried my best not to tell her because, I mean, I didn't want to violate this sacred garden. And finally, I had to tell her. And so then she, took me by the blouse and drugged me over to the woman's house and rang the doorbell. And we had to go in and sit there and have tea with doilies and all these things around. And she had to get permission for me to go to this woman's garden. I never went back to the garden after that because it, it was like sacred for me, and trying to explain it to people that weren't on that wavelength, it was a violation for me. So I learned pretty early on to just keep these experiences to myself because otherwise I'd either be prevented or I'd be, paraded around for social reasons. Yeah.
So
And
yeah, okay. So you kind of tucked it away in a sense. Okay, so let's get to 20 then, and kind of just remember that what's going
what
on then.
happened?
Yeah, I mean, was there really much of an interest in that subject, or was it really sort of diluted into, other things in life taking over?
No, I was the chaplain of the drill team in high school. I think I read from the Bible twice. I was reading from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Vedas, from Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Hyland. You know, I'm not sure what those girls thought of me, but they liked me, But I mean, I wasn't just doing like the whole, Bible reading thing. So I was always on this wavelength. And, when I went back for my 10-year and then my 20-year reunion from my high school, I had made it a point from the time I was young to always say hello to people in the hallways. And I was like an accelerated student, I was one of the smart girls. But I would like say hello to the C and D and F students all the time because those are the ones that were struggling. And when I went back, it was the most gratifying thing, because these are the students, and many of them had turned their lives around amazingly, but they would come up and say, you were the nicest person in high school. I never really fit in like with the cheerleader group or, no, those were like the super popular social kids. I was kind of like pretty smart, and nice, but like I liked everybody, especially the downtrodden, the underdog. I was like always a champion for them. So I never, when I went to school for college, I went to Florida State University, and I was taking a film history class, and I was 19, and I saw this poster that said the voice of the master, and it just like immediately spoke to me. And it was the same night as my film history class. So I finished my class and ran over to this meeting, which was like in its last 20 or 30 minutes. And when I walked in, the guy on the stage, there were maybe 100 people there, had a God worlds chart, a chart of the interdimensional planes. And it was like, oh my God, at last somebody has got a map of the dimensions. And I literally had this kind of tunnel appear with a light at the end of it, and I heard the voice of that spiritual guide that had been with me all the time I was growing up, and he said, "This is the path I've placed you on, beloved, follow it." And then everything cleared again. Well, the guy at the front was talking about soul travel, the ability that we all have as souls while we're still living in the physical body to literally learn to shift our consciousness and to get access to these higher spiritual realms. I was like, hot diggity dog. That is the path for me. I don't have to, believe something and then wait till I die to find out. I could actually find out in the here and now. And he had the roadmap and he had the processes for how to do it. And when that class was over, I'll just finish this and I'll just be quiet. But people came up to me. Someone asked a question about Jesus. They said, "Can you still be a Christian and soul travel?" And the guy at the front obviously wasn't. And so I raised my hand and I said, "Of course. What do you think Jesus was doing when he was doing remote healing, when he was telepathic, when he was accessing information at a distance?" I said, "Of course Jesus could soul travel." And afterwards, all these people came over and said, "How long have you been involved in this path?" I was like, "Oh, about 30 minutes, So that's kind of how it started for me.
So then, from 19 to when you had your first near-death experience, let's kind of like loop it to there, if we can do. Okay. So was the first near-death experience at a much younger age?
No, actually, from 19 on, once I began to study with the Viragi masters, in the outside world, I was a commercial photographer, but in the inner world, it was very much about gaining control of these gifts. So when I was 27, I was contacted by the priestesses of Isis. Now, I had no idea who the priestesses of Isis were. I mean, is it some strange Egyptian cult? Who knew?
And when you say contacted,
But
that was through what means?
Well, I had a very powerful inner plane experience where, in a dream, okay, where I dreamt that I had gone back to school for my master's degree, which is kind of a pun, to become a master, my master's degree. So I woke up in the dorm room. I was taking a nap, and there was all this sort of hieroglyphic writing on the walls, kind of like Egyptian, but different, like a galactic hieroglyphs. And I tried to remember them, but I fell back asleep. And when I woke up, of course, they were gone. But I remembered one symbol, which was a circle with a dot at the center. And somehow I knew this meant the beginning of all things and the end of all things, although I had no idea how I could possibly even know that. So I went to the library, big wood polished library, to see if I could find some reference to this symbol. And while I was there, the student assistant came and got me and said, "There is a phone call for you at the front desk." I'm like, nobody even knows I'm here. How can there be a phone call for me? So I go to the phone and I say hello. And this woman said, um, "Is this Tricia McCannon?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "We called to tell you that your dreams are real." And I'm like, "What?" And "Who is this?" And she said, "We're from the priestesses of Isis, and that's all we're permitted to tell you at this time." And then she hung up. And then I woke up, and it was a dream within a dream. And of course, who the heck were the priestesses of Isis? What do those symbols mean? I didn't know. So about 2 months later, in the physical world, I was going to eat lunch, and there was a wait. So I went into this beautiful shop, a store called Illumina here in Atlanta. It's closed now, but it had thick carpet and beautiful Egyptian statues and gorgeous jewelry and crystals. And I'm looking at this Egyptian statue thinking about this dream or interplane experience. And the woman behind the counter says, "Are you interested in Egyptian things?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've been dreaming of the priestesses of Isis." And she said, "Oh, tell me your dreams." And I'm like, "Listen, I'm not sure, you're going to understand my dreams. I'm not even sure I do." And she said, "Try me. I'm a hierophant," which means a high initiate in the priestesses of Isis. And of course, she was to become my shaman teacher when I was 27. And she's still alive today. Her name is Shasta. And she lives very hidden in the forest in a charming little cottage that has 4 rooms. The first time I went there, my eyes were like as big as saucers. The living room literally had nothing in it but a fireplace and 4 altars to different aspects of the Divine Mother. She had 11 white cats. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm a cat person," but that was a lot of cats. And she had her bathroom had all these symbols on it, like in my dream. And when I used her bathroom, I came back out and I said, "I think your bathroom is watching me." And she laughed and she said, "Yes, I thought you would like the bathroom." She explained that where she lived on about 10 acres was the intersection of 2 blind springs. That means underground springs. And she said that you could literally sit in that garden and it was like being on the cosmic internet. You could literally track what was going all over the planet from this holy vortex. And so I spent the day with her. So in my book, I have a book called my book. It's called Return of the Divine Sophia, Healing the Earth Through the Lost Wisdom Teachings of Jesus, Isis, and Mary Magdalene. And I tell the story. This book starts off actually with the story I just shared and how I went and spent the day with her. And the things that she said to me just completely shifted my reality. Like, for example, I did not know that all mammals are created biologically female. In other words, humans, any animal, any mammal, and that the existence of the male is because of the release of an additional androgen, which means that basically the male is a subset of the female, which is the exact opposite of what I was taught in my patriarchal Judeo-Christianity. I was taught, God created Adam, and then Adam was lonely, so he put him to sleep, took a rib, and created woman, and she's meant to be subservient and his servant for the rest of her life because, Adam came first and she's just like an appendage. Okay. So this is like blew my mind that biologically it's the exact opposite, that the universe is female and that the existence of the male is a subset because the goddess obviously wanted a companion. And thank goodness we have wonderful men like yourself in the world. It would be a boring world without it. But this completely upended my reality because this is science. And it was the opposite of what the patriarchy had programmed me to believe was true. And so in this book, basically, we take a journey into these deep shamanic circles where I begin to discover this hidden history of the planet where basically for thousands of years, because people could look around and see that who gave birth was the feminine of every species, that it was believed that the creator of all was the Divine Mother. And she was not only transcendent outside of creation, but she was immanent. She was present within creation itself. And so that whole experience changed my life. And during that time, for thousands of years, men and women ruled together in equality in a partnership model, and there was no war on the planet. And of course, that's very different from the society that we're in today. So that began my journey into discovering these hidden secrets, including the secrets of Mary Magdalene and the goddess and the Holy Grail and the Merovingian bloodline of Jesus and all of that I talk about in some of my courses.
And yes, there's a number of courses that you do, and there are some courses right now that are on discount, and the links are just below. And if you use a coupon code right now, which is more MOORE 44, you'll get a discount on some of those courses below. We will talk about some of those courses in this interview as well. So I mean, there's so many ways we can go with this. I kind of want to keep to that kind of, that the progression of your work to where you got to where you got. Do you know what I mean? Um, yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay. You've had three near-death experiences. That is interesting stuff as well. People love the near-death experiences. So, going from where you just were there, right? So, where were you at the time? I mean, were you settled down with anyone? Were you, were you was it a corporate job you had? What was going on?
No, no, I don't think I really quite cut out for the corporate world. I, I'm more of a mystic researcher. So I, when I went to school, I decided to. My parents said just don't major in art or theater, so I majored in art and minored in theater. Of course, being the rebel that I am, and I became a commercial photographer. I opened my studio when I was 23, an art director. So I shot for Coke and AT&T and IBM and Georgia Pacific and Ralph Lauren and all of those wonderful companies. And I had that studio until about 13 years ago. So my straight Clark Kent life was that, and I never sort of intended to be a spiritual, teacher that travels around the world or do 6,000 clairvoyant readings like I've done, or do these week-long healing intensives. But I've been a keynote at conferences for the last 20 something years, and I still see clients for soul readings and astrology and healings and so forth. But what happened for me is along the way, when you say to spirit, and when I was about 27, I started praying to the divine, to God, to be used for world healing. That was a big prayer for me. I didn't want to just, have a normal, straight Clark Kent job, and um, I wanted my life to count at a bigger level. And so I be careful what you pray for, as they say. And so I was praying to be used at this bigger level. And about that time, the masters that I've been working with, the Viragi and Sahaji masters, they took me on the inner planes to watch movies. And I'd wake up from a dream and I'd be like, that was a great movie. And then I was like, oh, it's not down here. Oh, I could write it as a screenplay. What a shock. And so that's how I started writing screenplays. And one of the very first one was about the UFO phenomena. And at that time, even though I'd seen UFOs from the time I was a child, I'd seen them in broad daylight, I'd seen them at night. You know, I thought everybody saw them. So I thought, well, maybe I should go to a conference. So I wound up going to a UFO conference, a MUFON conference, and sat and listened for 3 days to amazing people talking about, who was visiting our planet, and they were trying to make heads and tails of it, and so forth. And so because of that, I came back and set up an organization in Atlanta called the UFO Forum, which was a nonprofit organization where I brought in one speaker each month. And after enough years had passed, my guides had me begin to, they said, it's time for you to go and teach. It's time for you to find out who you are. And so I underwent a series of very powerful regressions to find out what had happened on board these ships, and how I was connected really with the Galactic Council, and acting really as an awakener down here to help the human race. And of course, I am part of the human race, to awaken to its own divine origins so that we can kind of grow up and join the galactic community. And so when my guide said it's time for you to go speak, I was like, not in this town. So they sent me to California, and I became, I spoke, I had an event, and all these key people came, and immediately I got invited on to the national and then the international circuit, and started taking groups to Egypt and England, love England, Peru, Greece, Mount Shasta, many, many sacred places. And sharing this information. Well, because of all the years I had studied with my shaman teacher, I was already initiated in the Egyptian mysteries, the Celtic mysteries, the Native American twisted hair tradition, which is a very interesting tradition that claims to go back 230,000 years in terms of the history of the planet. They claim to know the 12 extraterrestrial races that seeded our planet long ago. So I was presenting, very comprehensive information information with slides and evidence. And that's how I like to teach. I really love presenting and laying out the evidence so that other people can see it. And in all my courses, one of the things you'll discover is that I'm constantly using science and history and archaeology and anthropology in order to ground and validate what I found. And even in my books, most of my books have 500 to 1,200 footnotes and 100 pages of back matter in order to ground this knowledge.
Well, absolutely, yeah. So you're grounding the sort of knowledge with the research. You're not just writing these books. These books aren't just channeled in a sense. You're also going on, well, in some form that you're kind of coming through your higher self, but you're also bringing through
ancient knowledge.
Ancient knowledge, yes, but it's researched as well. That's what I want to try to get to. Yeah, this is,
It is.
yeah. So,
It is.
what about the near-death experiences there?
Oh, okay. I knew you were going to come back around to that. Okay, let me say some of this is very, very personal, but I will share one of these experiences.
Now,
Okay?
and also
There's a lot
the
to-
context of when it was happening. Was it when you had your photography business? Was it after the photography business? Was it? Yeah, just.
Oh, yeah, so let me just say that when I said be careful what you ask for, once I began to step into this, I had to kind of go through my own training. My guide showed up in force. I have probably this many journals, or by times about 5, where before I ever started speaking, where I was, I have a prayer altar where I would sit and discourse with my guides every day, and I would, take dictation. You would call it channeling. I would ask them a question. and they would answer.
Now, when was this? Prior to opening up your business? Was this in the early 20s, mid 30s? When was this?
This is probably early 30s.
Early 30s, and where you're living?
I'm living in Atlanta at a 3-story condominium. I was driving a 300ZX. I was like on the fast track with my photography. But what happened really when I was about 31 was I shared a little of this with you without going into the detail. I got engaged to be married to a British guy, and I gave up my 3,000 square foot condominium, my 300ZX, my 5,000 square foot studio, and I moved to England. And basically, it crashed and burned. That's the short story. And so when I came back from that, believe me, I was in a pretty sad state of affairs. I probably, if I had believed in suicide, I probably would have jumped off the bridge or something. But instead, I was on my knees in prayer every single day for an hour, hour and a half. Well, during that period of time of prayer, this is the classic dark night of the soul, where your ego is shattered. Okay, your core, the personality you thought you were, is like wiped away. Your house burns down. Your child dies. Your husband leaves you for another person. The whole life you thought you were going to create dissolves, and so you are in the I don't know. The only thing I know is that the divine is real, and I'm going to make contact. So my clairaudience really came online during that period of time, and I began to hear angels singing, and they were actually speaking with these and thous and those, like the ancient language. I mean, I'd never heard that before. And my clairaudience and clairvoyance really took a leap. And I was, like I said, I was in the schoolroom of divine download from my guides and from these higher angelic forces. This is before I started speaking or anything. Like I said, I never really intended that. I think I was in prayer to be used in service. So what has happened as an answer to that prayer, my life took a turn. And when my guide said, well, you want to be used in service, then we want you to do this. And sometimes I was like, screaming and kicking and like, I don't know about that. I'm not gonna go out there and speak and tell them I've had these experiences. No, they'll burn me at the stake. I definitely had that resistance, but it was like, okay, I'll do it. I'll surrender. I'll just go down this path. And of course, miracles happened as a result. It's like stepping out on faith and following the path of that service. So some of these near-death experiences are about me being used to transmute enormous amounts of karma for large groups. And that's why I'm not really ready to talk about some of them, because I should write a book about this.
Okay,
Be-
but in general,
yeah.
then, in general, what I mean, what happened? How you actually
Well,
passed away, or you crossed over?
so I'll tell you, like I said, about one of them. One of them was in 2003, and that one, I had already gone at that point through two. Uh, One main illness where I was transmuting all this karma, and then one surgery where I almost died. And each one of those was like a $20,000 medical bill. Okay. So this one was going to be a $40,000 medical bill. So when I got to the other side this time, I got to meet my light counsel. And I think this is why they allowed this to happen. I, you know,
Well, let me just stop you there. Let me just stop you there. How did you pass? What happened? When did you?
okay.
You was on an
Well,
operating
yeah,
theater
yeah,
table?
yeah.
You was
I wound up getting a fallopian tube infection, and I wound up. It was like I had the flu, but with high fever for about 4 days. I went to the doctor. The doctor immediately sent me for a sonogram. They threw me in the hospital. They were afraid it was going to explode. And if it had exploded, I would have died because it was E. coli. E. coli is something that's in the intestines, and its job is to break everything down. But if it gets outside of the intestines, it can take down every system of your body. And so if that had exploded, pretty much I would have been dead. And so they put me on 5 different antibiotics intravenously for 2 weeks in the hospital. And I kept saying, you guys have to let me out. I have cats. I have to go home. I've got bills. Who's going to pay the bills? So anyway, they only agreed to let me out if I would go every single day for intravenous transfusions. So I did. And so after 2 weeks, they did another sonogram. This is a whole month of treatment. And basically it had doubled in size, where there was like two tennis balls. And they said, we have to operate, or, you're going to be dead. So they did. And so they operated. And so, the 2.5-hour surgery took 4 hours. I died on the operating table and came back. So what happened for me was I found myself in this temple, a domed temple with these 5 light beings that were luminous. They were humanoid in shape, but I couldn't see any features. They were just luminous white golden light, and they flooded me with unconditional love. They said, "We see who you are. We really honor you for all the thousands of people that you have helped." And I said, "I want to come home," and they said, "Well, if you come home now, how about all those thousands of people you said that you would help before you came in that you won't be able to help?" And I don't know how they did it, but they let me see my life as if I had gone ahead and crossed over. And I realized several things. I realized that we all come in with a contract. And if we don't fulfill that contract because we throw in the towel early, or we kill ourselves, or we waste our lives, then we're very, very disappointed with ourselves when we get to the other side, because then we realize we've let a lot of other people down, and we failed in our own mission, and we've failed to grow to the next level of where we could grow. And I also realized uh, a lot of other things at that time. It was when I talk about direct transmission, these beings, it's like an enormous amount of data that they transmit to you in the twinkling of an eye. And so I said that I would come back. Um, and so since I've been back, I've written 3 of my 4 books. I have a mystery school that I've taught for 14 years, and I have 12 or 13 of those classes online. Each one of them is 100 to 180 pages, and you can find them in my website, Tricia McCannon Speaks.com. And then, of course, I've created these beautiful, beautiful classes for Sacred Stories Media, which are, probably the shortest is about 5 hours, but they're different classes within one course. And the longest, I think I've got one on the Egyptian mysteries, it's 9 or 10 hours. One on the Lost Years and Secret Teachings of Jesus, which one of my books is about this. This one has about 1,200 footnotes and 100 pages of back matter. And they all have about 100, 120 illustrations because I'm a teacher.
I know. Just sort of show how thick that is as well. It's quite a thick book, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a thick book.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And well, this one took 3 years to write. It was a pretty big deal. And then then one of my classes is on the goddess and Mary Magdalene and the Holy Grail and the Merovingian bloodline, which is the bloodline with Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And this book, Return of the Divine Sophia, is the one that really is about discovering how a lot of our history has been conscripted really by this patriarchal wave that came in around 4,000 years ago. And so for a long time, as I said, the creator was thought of as the divine mother, and then it became the divine father and mother. And that's wonderful because there is a very beautiful, beautiful aspect that is the divine father and mother. And then it became the divine father and mother and the daughter and son. In other words, the aspects of the mother and father that come to earth periodically to help humankind. And then what happened is the patriarchy rose up and tried to get rid of the mother, the daughter, and the son. And they did. They succeeded. We got the son back with Christianity. We never got the daughter back. And the mother got turned into Mary. And of course, Mary, the mother, is wonderful. But, I have this really beautiful book in my bookshelf of, all these 250 appearances she's made around the world in her spirit body, where millions of people have seen her. But the preface by the Catholic Church says, we just want to make sure everybody knows there was nothing holy or special about Mary. She was just a woman who lent her womb to the Son of God to be born. So the patriarchy, instead of saying the divine mother and the divine father, the divine daughter and son, it's like, no, who created the universe? The male father, the male son, and the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost. Oh, what is that? I don't know. It's a bird. It's a dove. It's the mother. It's the divine mother. I mean, we've lost the thread of the plot when we get out of balance like this in our society.
Absolutely, absolutely, and just tying up what we were just saying there as well. Okay, so that near-death experience that you had really shifted you and opened you up to create the body of work that you've done now. But there were other near-death experiences, but they must have been later on in your career.
Well, the most recent one was this year in February, and I can talk a little bit about that one. Generally speaking, I think I'm very healthy. I basically am the kind of person who's healthy, and I have the flu once a year. So when I talk about these things, I don't want to sound like a hypochondriac, but I went in mid-February for gallbladder surgery, and unfortunately, they punctured my small intestines. So instead of being in there for 3 days, I was in there for 2 weeks, and when I got out, I could not hold any food down, and everything I ate or drank, I continued to throw up. And so, of course, my doctor, who was wonderful and monitoring this very closely, he was quite concerned, and it was like, maybe you have to come back in the hospital. We have to put you in for the third time. And so what happened was my guides, I had a, a, a very powerful inner plane dream where I was taken back into the inner planes by my guides. And they said, I had been asking them, well, is it time, is it time for me to die yet? Okay. It's like, do I get to go to the light yet? And they took me over to the other side and they said, okay, listen, we want you to know, you're only 2/3 of the way through. You have another third to go. And it's a big body of work you're going to be doing. And so what you need to do is meridians are out of balance. You need to go need to go to an acupuncturist because your gallbladder meridian has been shut down, and that's why everything's being backwashed into your stomach and you can't hold any food down. And so that was on a Saturday night. By this time I was very, very weak because you could imagine, you're throwing up for all this time. And so a friend of mine came over and got me on that Sunday and took me to this fifth generation Chinese acupuncturist who's lovely here in town, Dr. George. And he did acupuncture. That was Sunday. By Wednesday, I could eat. I didn't throw up anymore after that. I went back to see him, I think, on Tuesday or Wednesday. And by Tuesday, I was able to give egg drop soup. And then by Wednesday, noodles. And then things stabilized. But that's how it works, is like sometimes, like you get to a point where of your own resources, you just can't do anything else. And so like, you're like, hey, is this it? Am I supposed to be leaving now? Is this the ticket out of here? No. Let's get your body back in balance. Glad you asked. Thanks for asking. This is the answer. Go get it done. So, so we were saying before, there's no free lunches here. Even if when you're clairvoyant and clairaudient and you're a healer and you're helping all these people and you're teaching, we also have to go through the human experience just like everybody else, and it's not so easy sometimes. In these books, I have all these powerful encounters with masters and angels and all these presences that have been my teachers, the gods and the goddesses. But there are many times that I've asked, and it's like, is anybody there? I don't know. I don't think anyone's gotten the message here. It's not getting through. The telephone line is dead for some reason. And then there are other times where, you least expect it. Here they show up. So it's like that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, so obviously, you've had these near-death experiences to really push you and to push you in the direction that you need to be going in, which is obviously what you're doing right now. And not all of us have to have a near-death experience to sort of have that, push. But
only the most stubborn. Only really has,
yeah,
right.
some of the more stubborn ones
right.
do, right? But
Right.
but also it allows people to see that they're through your journey that you've seen that there's this greater reality. And did the doctors know that at the time in any of your near-death experiences that you felt that you had left your body? Was it recorded that you had actually your heart
The one
stopped?
in 2003, yeah. I remember afterwards, I talked to the nurse about it, and she was a Black woman, and she turned white when I asked her about it. Like, she did not really want to have to admit that I had died on the table and they had lost me, but she did. So yeah, um, because they don't want to be liable for a lawsuit, of course.
Well, that's that's what it is. But you can't hide those facts sometimes when someone like yourself comes along that had that experience. Now, did you see any? Was it when you say out of body? What did you get to see your body on the operating theater?
No.
On the table?
No.
No. This was just
Right. No
more
tunnel of
inner
light.
plane.
No. It's
No.
not the whole. The people. I talk about them actually in my most recent book, which is the Angelic Origins of the Soul. This is my fourth book, which I kind of chronicle who are we as souls and where do we come from and the landscapes of heaven, and actually talk about the 14 different steps in the near-death experience, how people go through the tunnel. They'll get out of their body, they'll see their body, a guide appears, or they're pulled through the tunnel of light, they meet the being of light, then sometimes they get to go into the crystal city, sometimes they get to meet their council, so forth. No, I was taken directly to the council room, do not collect $200, do not stop here. It's like, okay, we get how she is. She wants to know the answers. We're taking her right to the top here. Well, relative top, we all have a council. Now, aside from our spiritual guides, everyone has guides. Aside from that, we have a governing council that we go between every lifetime. And once we've picked out the plan for our life, our guides go with us before the governing council, kind of like the big send-off. Okay, we're going to review your plan, then we're sending you off. After every lifetime, after we come back and do our life review, back with our soul family, we wind up once again with the council. So Some people have a council of like 12 members, some 7, some 3. Mine was 5. That's all I can say. I don't know what they look like other than these incredibly luminous beings of unconditional love.
Yeah.
But it was powerful.
Well, oh, I can imagine it was. I mean, you've done some amazing work. I mean, your books, I got you to show you one of your book covers off just earlier on, just how thick that is of information. So when you write a book or some of the books that you've done, let's go to the Jesus book, for example. When you wrote that book, that was almost 3 years of your life devoted to the creation of that content.
Yeah, it was each one of these books has been overseen by a spiritual team. I don't write the books willy-nilly. The team comes to me or the overlighting energy and asks me to write it. So what had happened was after my first book, the Dialogues of the Angels books, that's this book, which I always tell people this is the first one to read because you can breeze through it in like 2 or 3 days, and it's full of angels and masters and divas and fairies and all sorts of cool experiences, plus stuff about how you yourself can learn to open up and channel and all of that. Once that had happened, I was working on a book on decoding the mysteries of the ages because I am a high initiate within the great spiritual mysteries, and they contain enormous wisdom, and they have had to go underground in our societies as an underground stream. And this is the time to bring this back, which is why I'm teaching these amazing classes for Sacred Stories Media. But so what had happened is in this book, I had 2 little chapters on Jesus. And before I knew it, I had 3 chapters, and then I had 200 pages. So it was about his lost years, his secret teachings, and why he came between the change of the age of Aries and the age of Pisces. And so, it had exploded. So now my book was 650 pages, which the publishers are not going to like that. They like them 250 to 400 pages. And so I was like, Mamma mia, they're having babies. What am I going to do? So I thought, well, you know what I'll do is I'll just pull that section on Jesus out. That is going to solve my problem. So I was laying on the floor of my office over here, my healing room, and it was that week after Christmas when everything's very still and quiet, and my birthday's the day after Christmas, so everyone's tryptophaned out on turkey and broke, and it's perfect for a writer because it's like the cave time, and I had my hand over my eyes like this, and I became aware of this brilliant light shining down on me, and I moved my hand, and Jesus was standing in my office right over here. And he was totally in his light body and no colors, all in gold. And he was about 6 feet tall. He had the wavy hair to his shoulders. And without any preamble, he said to me telepathically, I want you to write a book about my lost years and secret teachings. There has been enough war and bloodshed in my name. And I'll just tell you, Kevin, it was like an arrow pierced my heart. His energy was so immense. It just opened your heart. And when I could even gather my wits to respond, I was like, yeah, I'm running out of money. Could I finish this book first? And he laughed and he just waved his hand. He said, don't worry, it'll just take a moment and I'll open every door. And that's actually what happened. Because I'm a visual teacher, I'm a hermetics teacher, and I teach visually. That's why, as a photographer, graphic designer, art director, I have, gorgeous, beautiful slides in these presentations. And even in my books, there are 100, 120 images in every one of these books. I thought, well, how am I going to organize this? It's a big subject. So I put together a whole series of DVDs on the Egyptian mysteries, the Jewish mysteries, and the Christian mysteries, the inner mysteries. And I started reading the book in June. And within about 3 weeks, I realized that I was looking at the existence of the Great White Brotherhood all over the world, in the Druids, in the Essenes, in the Therapeutae, in the Egyptian mysteries, in Persia, in the Far East, and they all had 3 levels of initiation. The first level was the Divine Mother, the mother and the daughter. Like the Greek mysteries were dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. The second level is the divine father and son. And the third level is the integration of the two. Well, how can you come to mastery if you've gotten rid of the masculine or the feminine? The masculine and feminine must come together in partnership, just like the left and right sides of the brain have to both be balanced to open up the third eye for your clairvoyant vision. And so I began to pray for some historical knowledge about the Great White Brotherhood. I couldn't take channeled information, not because it might not be true, but because historically, I can't prove it. You could be channeling an ascended master or the dog catcher, and who's to say? And I didn't want people arguing. I wanted it to be laid out where it was evidential. And so in July, about 3 weeks later, I was asleep. I was sleeping actually in my guest bedroom, which is about 20 feet from the computer, because they were waking me up at all hours of the day and night. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, I had this being appear by my bed, and he looked so much like Jesus, but I knew it wasn't Jesus. It was like a hair's difference. And he said to me, Sanat Kumara. And then he vanished. Well, I happened to have at that time a housemate who was an Indian guy who had studied with the Viragi masters, and he called me on the phone, and I said, Shankar, do you know who Sanat Kumara is? And he says, oh, he's one of the 4 great Kumaras. I'm like, who are they? Oh, they're the 4 sons of God who come to earth periodically. They're spoken of in the Vedas. I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, who are they? Well, there is Sanat Kumara, who is the head of the Great White Brotherhood. I was like, holy smokes. Well, who else? Well, there is Sananda Kumara, who was, of course, Jesus. I was like, oh my God. Well, who are the others? There is Sananka Kumara, who was, of course, Thoth. Well, I had been working with Thoth for years. And I'm like, who's the 4th one? There is Sanantana Kumara, who comes very rarely, only in times of greatest darkness. And he, of course, was Horus, and also Krishna and Rama. They each have an MO for how they appear, how they come. So, this is how, and then as I shared with you before, there were books that materialized on my bookcase. There were people who came and rang my doorbell that told me that Spirit had told them to come to my house with ancient documents. So it was quite the journey, and that's how each one of these books have been. The ones on Mary Magdalene and the goddess, literally when I would draw these drawings, these different goddesses would come in and like indwell my body and help me to do the drawings. And then they would move off after about 4 to 6 hours and say, well done. And so I definitely had spiritual help.
Well, that's incredible, some of the information that you're obviously going through here. And, your books are available through all good bookstores and stuff. Now, just give us your website while we're here as well. Your website is?
It's Tricia McCannon Speaks.com. So it's just my name, Tricia, and McCannon, McCannon Speaks. .com. You can get my books there. You can get them through Amazon. And of course, my courses are available through Sacred Stories Media. And I think that they can put in, www.learn.Sacred Stories Media, and all those courses will come up. And I've done 5 or 6 for Sacred Stories that are great.
Yeah, now we're going to link those courses below in the description of this video. And if you're listening back to this as a podcast as well, again, just go to Sacred Stories Media. And again, there is a code to put in there, which, I'm just going to plug here one more time, which is more MOORE 44. And just for a limited time right now, you'll be able to get those courses a little bit cheaper. But, I think what's interesting is I suppose you never thought that doing these books would lead to courses in a sense, but the courses are there to sort of have the greatest impact with some of the work that you're doing as well. Is that right?
Yeah, what's happened is when I created the Mystery School, that has a whole nother level of information. And you can find the Mystery School on my website, Tricia McCannon Speaks. Then I created the books, and then I created the courses. And it's different information. Although there's overlapping, I've created all of these so that each time there's a different body of knowledge that I'm bringing forth. Each one of the courses is divided into modules or classes. And now some of them are short, like 30 minutes or 45 minutes for a module. And the cool thing about Sacred Stories is when you sign up, she sends you the link. You can watch it immediately, but you can watch it anytime you want, as often and as many times as you want. It kind of really becomes yours from that point on, which is great. And you can watch the first module in each of the courses for free, which is very cool. And then go, oh my God, this course is for me. And then you say, I want to sign up, which is great. The one I did on the first one I did for her was The Lost Years and Secret Teachings of Jesus. And that's a very beautiful, powerful course about his, when was he really born? What was the Star of Bethlehem? Where did he study? What was his time among the Essenes, among the Druids, among the Persians and the Magi, among his 7 years in the temples of ancient Egypt? What happened when he went to India and he studied with the Hindus? And then he wound up, in Rajagira for 6 years with the Buddhists, where he was acknowledged as the second Buddha that the first Buddha had predicted would come 500 years after him. So profoundly beautiful, very honoring, and of course over 1,200 images, very rich images. So it becomes a story. It's really fun to watch. You can read the reviews. There's a lot of 5-star reviews. The second one I did was on the Divine Mother. So it's the many faces of the goddess and all these different spiritual paths throughout the world, many of which we've forgotten. There's a lot of archetypes for men, the warrior, the sage, the king, the philosopher, the hero, but what happens about women? We're in a place where we're waking up to these other archetypes for women, but for a long time we basically had the virgin and the mother and the whore, the prostitute, or the bad girl Lilith, and we did have Athena. We were allowed to have her because she was a warrior. But the truth is there's many expressions for the feminine as there is for the masculine. And so that course goes into Mary Magdalene. What was the Holy Grail? What was the quest for the Holy Grail? How is it connected with the Merovingian bloodline? And how the Knights of the Round Table were actually looking for the descendants or the heirs from the Mary Magdalene Jesus bloodline, because they really wanted to bring that divine feminine back into balance with the divine masculine. So that is a beautiful and very empowering course too. Then I have a class. The third one I did was on the Egyptian mysteries. So if you've ever been interested in Egypt, it's really profound. It teaches you Hermetics. We talk about Thoth. We talk about the Emerald Tablets. We talk about the Hermetica. We talk about the levels of initiation and the Great Pyramid. And anyway, that's a fabulous course too. And you're very welcome to watch the first one. And then there's a fourth one. Well, the fourth one's really about where we are now today. We are in a place where we are passing through the center of the galaxy. We, the galaxy has a equator, galactic equator, and we don't just go around like a flat record player. We go like a sine wave below the galactic equator and above the galactic equator. So what's happening now, about 450 years ago when the Renaissance started, we begin to be at the bottom of that passage. We're now about in the middle. It takes about 1,000 years to pass through the galactic equator. So what's happening is many things are occurring. The poles are melting, not only on our planet, but on every single planet in our solar system. Our sun is being activated with new energetic codes that are changing the DNA of people and awakening our spiritual gifts, talents, and abilities, and our ability to access the higher realms. The divine feminine has to rise, and as we can sort of see, the patriarchal in its negative form is kind of, trying with tooth and nail to hold on, creating division instead of unity, raping and pillaging the planet instead of being honoring of the animals and all living things on it. And all this is going to have to change or we're not going to be here. And so it's about the evolution of consciousness and how periodically between the change of these great ages, the age of Aries to Pisces, Jesus came, 4400 BC, Mithra came, in in these changes of the ages, these great solar lords or avatars come back to Earth to kind of give us a message and steer us in the right direction. And so it's the profound course as well. So that's the one about this return of the solar lords and the galactic cycles of time.
Okay, so we've mentioned the Mary Magdalene, we've mentioned Return of the Solar Lords. Did we mention the Mysteries of Ancient Egypt?
We did mention that one, but I just done a new class for her about the Tree of Life. Do you have that one's probably? Yeah, I don't know if that's in your wheel well or not.
No, let's have a look at the Tree of Life as well. What is that about?
That is about how in every culture of the world, this motif, this hermetic symbolism of the tree of life exists. I mean, the Mayans, the Celts, the Hindus, the Persians, the Egyptians, even long before even the Jews got a hold of it with the Kabbalah. But it's about it as a template for basically ascension, and how this template was brought to Earth by the Anunnaki gods a very long time ago, particularly by Thoth, the god of wisdom in ancient Egypt, who really loved humanity and said that the divine spark that lives within us is the same spark that lives within them. We're just in more fragile, mortal, shorter lived bodies, and they're in much longer lived bodies. So it's really about that, and you'll see it on the website. But the tree of life deals with so many levels of balancing the male and female within us to take the middle path that allows us to go straight into the heart, up into the third eye, up to the crown chakra, and to make connection with that higher power. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of idea, but you can certainly watch the first module and see if you like it.
Absolutely, they can. No, that's fantastic. Thank you just for going over that. That really does help a lot. And I know that there's so much to your work. There really is. I mean, these books are just so. They're just encyclopedias of information that you put a lot of love and a lot of effort into. And I think that's and the book before that as well. I think they're that's a future interview. Do you know what I mean? Most definitely, because it's I could be here with you for a long time, and your work continues to grow as well, doesn't it?
Well,
your exploration.
It is. I mean, I'm always growing, so I'm always presenting new information to people. And I believe, kind of at the end of the day, that we are in a time of great evolutionary transition. We're in a time on the earth where we are getting opportunity to graduate. And that means to clean up the places where we've gotten stuck in the past, whether it's a past life or this life, to dissolve those karmic wounding patterns, to be healed. This is one of the reasons why I continue to do soul readings for people all over the world and continue to do this healing work. And that ultimately we are challenged to awaken, go into our heart, open up our third eye, make that connection with our higher self and with our guides and with a whole host of spiritual beings that really love humanity, and they love us, and they want to see us wake up and evolve so that we can really bring the planet with us. So that's kind of where I am. If you had to kind of simplify it, is I'm all about helping people to awaken to the divine nature that lies within every living thing, and certainly lies within us as human beings, if we can, let go of the things that cloud us.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And, obviously we're getting to the end of this interview right now, but what would be an important message that you'd like to share with the audience as well?
I just think that there's no time to waste. I think that sometimes our societies are set up in such a way to keep us like little, chipmunks on the wheel. And I think that we have to realize that this isn't just another lifetime. We are in graduation day. We're at the end of a 25,920-year cycle. This is a time for us to do our inner work. If you've got wounds from the past, time to clean them up, time to awaken and find out who you are, time to make a connection through the heart with the highest vibrational beings that you can work with. And so, for some it might be the Christ, it might be Buddha, it might be the Divine Mother, and there are many ways of framing it. I mean, all those beings at those higher levels agree with one another. They're not having dogma and religious wars. They're really up there, all of them rooting for us. So I would say, as you begin to open, make that connection through your heart, your head, your third eye with those higher angelic beings. Learn to set your protection around you. Just pull down a column of light and ground it down, and then invite in your higher self, invite in your guides, and invite in the highest vibrational spiritual teachers that you can work with at this time. And go from there, and be consistent with it. Don't just do it one time and say, oh, well, that was nice. It's like a phone call. Sometimes you have to pick up the phone and call the same time, roughly the same time every day. And after like the fifth or sixth time, they're like, oh, she really means it. She's really serious. Okay, let's send a team down there to make connection. And so it might take you a little while, but if your heart is there, what they care about is authenticity of your heart and your spirit. And that is what these higher beings respond to, is love. And that's what they share with us.
Well, Trisha, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. I know we're going to be again in contact with each other, and there'll be more content coming this way. But I think just for a first interview, I really do appreciate you coming on and just giving us your time right now as well. So thank you
Kevin,
very much.
It was such a pleasure. You are a delight yourself, and we need more of you in America. So I hope you're here to stay.
Thank you.
Bye. God bless.